work. Okay, then. Welcome everyone to the first brown bag lunch after JFrog as a conference. So we'll be continuing doing this for a while. And today we have with us Sven Ruppert from JFrog. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, hello. So my name is Sven and I'm from Germany. And well, I'm working for JFrog and now I'm doing one of the complex things. I try to activate my stuff here. My slides, perfect. So what you would see is that I'm doing it a little bit different. I'm just using a mixer on my side. So if you're my guinea pigs, I try this stuff out and well, give me feedback if it works or not. So you have to maximize the speaker view. So I'm not sharing my screen in a classical way. Okay, so, well, as I mentioned, Sven from Germany, I'm working for JFrog, developer advocate, focusing here in Java, Kotlin, and DevSecOps. And we want to talk today a little bit about web components for the core Java developer. So I'm a core Java developer since, I don't know, 1996. I started with Java and never learned something different. So I'm stuck to this one. And on the other side, from time to time, I have the challenge to create graphical user interfaces, web interfaces. So, and so for this, I searched a long time and I found a possibility how we can go with new technologies, especially with web components, and use them on the server side. But on the other side, we will get some challenges here as well. So I will focus on this one in the second part of this presentation. So because if we are more convenient, we are grabbing more technologies together, and more technologies grabbing together means that we are talking about not only vulnerabilities, we are talking about polyglot vulnerabilities or polyglot environments with vulnerabilities. And I want to show you a little bit how you can activate the stack, use the stack, and to harden the stack against non-vulnerabilities. So this is the main focus. If you have any question, feel free to write it down in the chat or just ask me. So we are not so many people, so it's really up to you. Do what's more comfortable for you. On the other side, if you want to see a little bit more about me, have a look on YouTube. Since COVID, I'm not traveling, but I'm going to the forest and recording IT stuff in the woods. So what are we doing today? We are talking about this web component stuff. And what I want to focus here is on the standard itself. So what is a web component? A web component is a mix of HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. So it's a pure client-side thing. And what we want to get with this is that all of them, or if you're looking back in the history, so my first web app was, I don't know, 2004, 2000 something in this. And we had these frameworks like Struts1, and later we had something like Tapestry and Wicked and all this. And what they always try to do is they want to map some kind of server-side action to generate a web interface. But on the other side, the web early days was a mixture of different technologies. Different companies want to push their proprietary standards to the front end and want to get the biggest market share, whatever. And over the years, different browsers, different support of different standards, technologies, and all this, it was just a pain to create web components or web apps that are fitting to all mobile or to all devices. And then over the time, we got mobile devices, something like an iPad with big screen, on mobile interface with small screens. And we wanted to have this web pages or web apps everywhere. And the second thing is that more or less, people wanted to have this feeling of a web app like a native app. So it's going in this field of progressive web apps. So there was a big move. And over the years, we got something that's called web components. It's a standard. It's a definition based on these three technologies, HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript, to define an encapsulate component. And the biggest thing what they wanted to achieve here is that if you have a component library like in JavaFX or Swing or whatever, you can just grab different components and mix them together to new components. So we're talking mostly about two streams. With one stream, the person that's creating a basic web component, means creating a button, creating a grid, creating whatever. And then we are talking about the consumer that want to build compositions out of it. So a screen with buttons and text fields and all that stuff. But all this stuff is pure client side. So the web components itself, they are just, you can just activate it on a HTML page and then clicking on a button, but then nothing is happening. So if you want to have some actions here, you have to connect it somehow. And I'm focusing now on the part that want to have it server side. So you have pros and cons going pure client side, going pure server side. But with this approach, what you could do is you can build a hybrid application. So half client side and half server side. It really depends on your needs. And on the other side, if you're a server side developer, you want to have it like a Java component. So, from JavaFX or Swing, if you want to have a button, you just say new button. And then you want to see something. So this is what you want to have. You want to have something like a breakpoint. You want to debug. You want to, use your tool, from the Java world. So how we can connect. If you want to have this one, we need somehow this communication between the web component and the server-side representation. And we have some frameworks that are doing this one, because if you start doing all this communication by yourself, it's quite pain in the ass, because you have to deal with long polling stuff, with firewalls, with routers, with connection, disconnection, and connection again, and all this stuff. So this is not a trivial thing. And you want to make sure that the communication between the client side and the server side is a little bit secure, so that you're not so easily can compromise it. Or if in the front end the button is disabled, you want to make sure that on the server side it's exactly the same, or reverse. So this communication is not easy, but we have some frameworks how to communicate all this stuff. More or less the basic here is the Atmosphere framework. And then we want to have the Java side. So if you're doing all this stuff by yourself, it's a lot of work, but there is something that you can use as a basic to start with your work. And we can divide it in three parts. We have the pure web component, we have the communication layer, and then we have this bundled version with the Java component. If you're talking about the Java world, maybe you want to do it with a test-driven approach as well. So it would be great if you can not only say new button and you have a button, but it would be great if you are using this one in a JUnit 5 as well, in the JUnit 5 universe. Then we have two different ways. So pure server side or full stack testing. I will cover this in a few minutes a little bit, but we have two versions. We have a version of the web component, and then we have a version of the Java side. It must not fit together. Mostly you can provide it together, but you have independent versioning if it's necessary. So what can we do? We have an open source framework on the market that is doing more or less exactly what we need. And this is called Harden. So Harden is from this Finnish company, and the most stuff from them is open source. What they have done. In the past, they have built something based on GWT. So the approach was more or less, you have this Java side, then you're generating a huge thing, and then you have this GWT front end. It's more or less a virtual environment based on JavaScript in the client side. And then they started communicating on it. But a few years ago, they followed the standard and shifted from GWT to the web component stack, because this is a standard and all browsers are supporting it now. So this was just a logical step to go through. What they've done is they created all components from scratch, a button, a text field, and all the stuff. And first, they build it as a pure web component. So you can go to this website and say, I just want to have this button as a client-side version. Then you don't need to take the Java side with you. And then they wanted to have their old customers again, because they are focusing on the Java side, and they built up this Java environment, so a Java representation. So what they've done is exactly, they split it up the whole development between a pure client side, the communication part, and the Java part. The Java part in Vaadin is called Vaadin Flow. And what they have is they have their own abstraction layers. So if you're reading the documentation, you don't see this so exactly. So they want to sell their own components together with the Java backend. But if you're going a little bit inside this API, you will see they have this abstraction layer, and you can adopt it to other web components. And here I'm showing you the example to do this one with SAP 5 UI or this SAP UI 5 web component. This was a test and it's running well. So by the way, I'm sharing the GitHub coordinates from this project so that you can just take this one as an example and then try it out by yourself. So what they have is they have this mapping based on the technical steps you need if you're going with web components. So the web component world is managed in a similar way like the Maven or the Gradle world. So you have something, a package manager, and this is npm in this case. And if you want to have a web component, what you need is an npm install, grabbing this web component so that you have it on your local environment. And then you can start using it like an import statement. It's the same like in Java. If you want to have a class, you have first this import statement, then it can use it in your class. And a web page is more or less, you have this import statement, then you can use it in this page, in this namespace or whatever you want to say to it. And the last thing is you're using actually this web component. So in an HTML5 page, you have this dedicated tag. So every web component will have its own tag. And here you're using the own tag inside your HTML. So if you want to map all these phases to the Java world, you have to deal with exactly these three parts: this npm install, this import, and the usage of the tag, so mapping to a Java class. And for this, if you're going to this Vaadin Flow framework, you will find three annotations that are mapping exactly this lifecycle. And the first one is this npm package, and you need the value. The value is exactly what you need for the npm install command. It's something like the group and artifact ID in Maven. And then you're grabbing this from out of the repository. You have it locally in your local npm repository. And then you need explicitly a version. So you can't deal with the latest tag or whatever. So you really have to deal what is a component and the version. So then you have a defined version that's available. The stacks, the Vaadin Flow stack, can, with their lifecycle, grab this stuff from npm, from the repositories, and you have it locally. The next is you need this JavaScript module, something like an import statement. It's an annotation as well. And then you're just adding exactly what you would use as an import statement. And this depends a little bit on the web components. Here on this SRP 5, you have this web components /this/batch.js. It could be a little bit different from different web components. This is not clearly defined, so they don't have always the same naming schema. And then you have this tag. And for this, to define this one, they have the annotation tag and then exactly the name with what you will find. So if you're on webcomponents.org, you will find all this information on the website from the web components. You can map it immediately. How this looks like at a Java class, to activate this one on the Java side, for the first steps, what you need here is just these three annotations. So you say npm package, grab this, JS module. I want to have explicitly a mapping out of this collection of the components. And here I'm grabbing the batch. And it should represent the tag on the client side called UI5 batch. So with this, you have exactly these three steps. And you have to extend your own class from component from the Flow framework. What you get with this is the whole lifecycle, grabbing stuff and mapping via a communication layer, and in the background it's Atmosphere, the Atmosphere framework. And with this one, you have the whole communication, all this stuff done. This is just a holder. So, but we have already a lot of stuff solved. So what would be the next step? If you want to map this one, or if you want to deal now with actions and attributes and properties and all this stuff, will find inside the documentation of this web components, for example, something like this. I have this web component UI5 badge, and I have a property or an attribute. Sometimes they are mixing it up. So the difference between property and attribute is not always very clear. So this is not nice, but you have to fiddle it a little bit around. So, but you will find this definition here. I have this color scheme with a value 1. And then what you can do is you're just creating a getter and a setter for exactly this property. And here you have to go over one indirection in this framework. You're just creating inside your class this getter and setter with the name you want to have. So there is no explicit naming schema you must follow at this point. So you can adopt your API or your requirements here with a naming schema and all this stuff. And then internally, you're going from this component to get element. What they've done is they have this class component. This is the graphical component, but inside they have this element. Please don't ask me why they have done this one, but they have these two different levels of abstraction. Component for this is now the thing we want to put something around, and then this generic element. And from this element, you have the methods like set property, get property, and all this stuff. So this generic methods that are dealing with properties or attributes on an element. And what you're doing is just property name, property value. That's it. And then you're setting it. So here we have, for example, this as 1. It could be an integer or whatever on the Java side. So make sure that if you're mapping this stuff, think as early as possible about the possibility how you want to deal with types. In the front end, it's more or less everything is some kind of text. But what you can do here is you can say this color schema is an int, or you can map it, for example, what I've done here, to an enumeration, because you have just the value from 1 to 10. And then you are just using here an enumeration, and make sure that your type safe as early as possible on your own side. So that's the only thing. So with this, we're able to grab the information from the client side already and setting stuff. The same, if you want to not only set this stuff, if you want to get this stuff, it's exactly the same way. You're going to get element. Now you have the representation. Then instead of set property, you say get property, and you're using the name that is defined inside this web component. So this is more or less everything if you're just dealing with attributes. And if you're comparing what is the amount of work, what you have to do by yourself and what you will get with all this stuff, it's amazing. You're just creating a class, extending from component, you're adding 3 annotations. That is just the stuff that you will find inside the documentation of the web component. And then you can start with creating getters and setters. But this is just the first level we want to reach. The next one is, if you have now this badge, you want to create a composition of web components. So if you're thinking a little bit about these web components, they build it because they want to have every web component isolated and independent, so that you have something like Lego bricks you can put together. And it should be exactly in the same way. If you want to have complex attributes, it should be a web component. That's it. So how this is done. If I want to have complex components at this side, then going here, for example, to this documentation from this UI5 badge, you will see that inside the UI5 badge, you can have a child. And this child is a UI5 icon. And this UI5 icon has some attributes and all this stuff. So how to do this one? First of all, you're just creating a class called UI5 icon. You're adding 3 annotations, extending from component, and you're doing all this stuff with the properties you have. And then with this one, you can go now to your UI5 badge and creating getter and setter methods for complex childs. The only thing that is different is that instead of get element set property, you're just saying get element append child. There's one thing again, I don't know why they've done it, but this append child want to have an instance of element, not an instance of component. So you have to unwrap the complex child again. So get element, append child, takes the instance of your component and call the method get element. That's it. Now you have the possibility to build a tree of web components on the Java side. And yeah, that's more or less, now it's up to you. You can build trees, tables, whatever. So everything's there. There's something with actions, for example, a click listener on a button and all that stuff, but it's more or less going in the same way. So if you are now able to activate actions, getting properties, setting properties, building up complex trees of all this stuff, what we achieved so far is that we can create now a jar. Inside this jar, I'm wrapping all this stuff. I'm pushing this to Artifactory, a Maven repository or whatever. And my colleague, he never worked with web components, can use this stuff like the following. I want to have a new badge. I say new UR5 badge. I'm setting text, I'm setting color, I'm grabbing an icon, I'm setting an icon, I'm whatever. And finally, I'm putting my stuff to the page I want to have it. So you can use a whole body flow environment for this one. And you can use basic documentation how to deal with this one, but you can map it completely to your own web component universe. So that's the basic work you have to do here. Any questions so far? Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. This is Thomas.
Yeah.
As I understand this, you can create complex user interface by combining these components. If I have a user interface that has a lot of interdependencies between the GUI components in such a way that if I make a selection in a drop-down list, I want the contents of another drop-down list to change, for instance. Can I do, and I understand you can do that server side, but can you do it client side to reduce the round trips?
Yeah, so if this is something for you, you can do it client side. Then you have to deal with how to work on a web component. Then the web component must be done. What I'm not covering here is extension of what you can do with adding JavaScript libraries. So what you could do is you can write in Kotlin your stuff, generate the JavaScript libraries out of it, and adding them via annotation to the class so that they are available on the client side as well. And then you have different approaches, working on the web components itself, adding some functionality and triggers on the server side. Well, it depends what exactly you want to achieve, but the possibility is extending with JavaScript that you're annotating to classes and this indirectly to the page, the Vaadin flow page. You can say, in this page, I have this JavaScript library and so on, or you're just modifying the web components itself. Yeah, this is a short version. The long version would be a GitHub repository with examples and then filling around. So that's what I can say so far.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, but one thing is one interesting aspect if you're talking about how to combine this stuff. If you're talking about inheritance and delegation, I just pushed on YouTube. It's already activated. I'm not sure if I pushed it out so far, but I'm just talking about the difference between inheritance and delegation here. And in graphical user interfaces, what's really interesting to see is that if you're building this big compositions, that it's sometimes even better if you're just connecting them via a tiny observer pattern, or if you're just delegating in the composition instead of going over the inheritance, because then you have really this tiny round trips that are just shifting around this message itself. And then the difference between doing it client side or having this round trip depends on the architecture and if you're going over mobile connections and so on, sure. But you can build very responsive, pure server-side applications. So if you need it, but well, other topic. So yeah, what we reached so far is we have a jar. My colleague, as a Java developer, can just grab it and start writing this UI. And with this UI, I have now a few things I want to highlight. One thing is, what have you done now? We have now from the Java side this dependency, but under the hood, I'm combining two different technologies. So I'm talking immediately with my application with two package managers, with two repository types, with this npm and with the Maven world. And what I should be aware of is, whatever you're looking at your code, you have this indirect view to the dependencies, not only the dependencies, but all the different technologies. So you have to check, for example, not only the vulnerabilities of Java, you have to check the vulnerabilities of the npm stack as well. And so it's very convenient on one side that you are hiding technology. On the other side, you should have an eye on this one, what you're adding indirectly, and not only with the transitive dependencies in the Java world, but with the transitive dependencies that are going to different technologies. So we will have a look at this in a few minutes. So the next thing is, if you have now this Java class, and I can say, hey, I have a new button, and then go, or a new text field, set text, and so on, I have to deal somehow with here, then you can see it better. What you can do is that you will need the TDD part. So if I have it on the Java side, why not using the TDD part on the Java side as well? Why should I use for my testing a JavaScript tool for the web components? Then testing my JavaScript, I can do it completely together. Testing web apps, you have two different approaches. Here I'm showing the full approach, means I'm testing the full web application. So with everything, means I have this web app, maybe I have the servlet container ramping up, the web app is running, I need a browser, I have the Selenium on top, or Selenoid I'm using, and then you have this robot that is doing something with the browser is invoking the web app, and altogether needs a test definition, so your JUnit 5 test environment and test runtime. So this is quite heavy, and there's a big thing. So maybe you don't want to test every time this full stack, but for integration testing or for later testing or for a nightly test or whatever, maybe this is a good approach. And what you need here is just the representation now on the Java side for the Selenium part as well. So in the end, what we're doing is exactly the same. So for web components, I'm mapping this because it's a standard, and I'm doing it, and then I can collect all these different web components. But if I'm talking about Selenium, there are not so many different frameworks. So say Selenium is some kind of standard. So I can focus on implementing against the Selenium representation of components, and they have done the same. I will show you two different things. The first one is, it is a commercial thing, this test bench, but it's open source and it's perfect to learn. What they have done here is, they have this web component on the Selenium side, and they have this button element on the test bench side, and they're doing exactly the same stuff. So they have this web thing, they have this communication, and then they have the Java representation. But here it's not extending from component, it's extending from test bench element. So if you don't want to spend the money, you can use this open source framework to learn how they have done it, because it's open source. It's fine. The main thing, what you should do is exactly creating your UI5 switch or batch element, extending from test bench element, and then you're doing exactly the same. Set property, get property, and you have an element tag. And it's exactly the same element name you're using for mapping the web component. And with this, you have now the Java component for building the web app, and you have the Java component to write tests over Selenium, again, this one. If you want to have a full stack test, that's a good thing. Yeah, just to have in mind, if you want, you can go really the full stack here. The only thing you have to deal inside this test, I don't want to explain now all this stuff here for this test, but you have to deal with the lifecycle. You have to make this lifecycle robust. I've done this, and I had an overlay of 200 milliseconds, ramping up servlet container, doing all this stuff. If this is fast enough, you can go with this. If it's too slow, maybe you should have a look at Caribou DSL. Caribou DSL is a Kotlin DSL that is under MIT license, and it will give you a Kotlin DSL on top of the Java model if you want. But on the other side, this Caribou DSL, there's a Caribou DSL testing. And there the approach is that you're just testing the Java part and trust that the communication and the web component part is running well. If this is enough because you just want to test your use cases, then you can do the whole test with this Caribou testing. You're mocking the internals of Harden away. And then you have this Java in-memory test. So we're talking about nanoseconds instead of hundreds of thousands of milliseconds. And then you can start creating tests against this Caribou DSL testing. So it really depends. If you want to have a full stack one, you have something like this test bench. If you want to have this your client server-side one, you can go with Caribou testing. So what I showed here is for the testing part itself, it's a good approach if you're doing it with design pattern page object. So testing, ramping up the whole stack with test containers, for example. If you want to know more about it, we can have a dedicated session about this one maybe, but you're ramping up the whole lifecycle. You have it in the Java world, and then you have the connection details like the address and all this stuff. And with this, you can ramp up the components and talking with Selenium to your web app. So it's possible. It's not so bad. I like it. So it really depends what you need. If you want to have a look at my prototype I've done here for this testing, it's under Harden Developer SRP UI5 for Flow. I think it's there, but just search for SRP UI5 for Flow, and then you will find it on my GitHub repositories. And you can use this one just as a base, or just do it by yourself. One thing, if you're talking about web components, quite often we have the challenge that we have to deal with serialization and all this stuff. And what I really recommend here is that you could go with security payloading against this one. This approach you can use for your Java side, so just testing there against serialization issues, but you can use the same stuff with a web component. So pushing stuff to the web component, check on the server side if something is going wrong, and reverse. So what you need for this one is more or less, you need a repository where you're storing all these compromised binaries. There are tools in the field that are able to generate compromised binaries for different technologies. You can store them in generic repositories so that you have the security payload testing suite or this data suite inside Artifactory in a generic repository that fits to your application version. And what you're doing with JUnit 5 is you are just ramping up the sandbox. You are doing this security payload injection, checking if you have the compromised functionality, yes or no, throwing it away, and using this one more or less to harden against typical attack vectors from the web UI world. For this, you have to deal a little bit with JUnit 5 custom test engines. It's available on the internet if you're interested in this.
So Sven, if you back up a little bit, so do you have any important information, because you were hiding part of the graphics with your overlay?
Oh, which one? Let me see.
Exactly. Okay, so it's just repos. Perfect. Thank you.
No, it's just repository. So what you need is this bidirectional cycle to you have a repository where you're grabbing the components and all that stuff. You have a corresponding repository to grab the security payload stuff. You're combining this one and make sure that the test result is stored as well in build information or whatever. So if you're using Artifactory pipelines, for example, you have this build information in dedicated repositories so that you have the full package of information. So what's the binary, what was the web app, and what's the build information you have. And yeah, well, that's more or less the point here. So talking about this security part is, if you have this web component and if I'm hiding all this stuff, we're going to this cloud native thing. We have these different architectures and layers. I don't want to go in detail to this one for this dedicated stuff, or I'm coming back or whatever, but the basic idea is, even with graphical user interfaces, they're going this approach of microservices. So a composition of micro UIs to a big UI. And this means you're thinking more or less about a rewrite instead of a refactoring, if you're going with this approach, or you have a big application and you're thinking about refactoring. It's the same. But with these tiny approaches and with playing around with new technologies and combining different technologies, you have this challenge that I'm a senior maybe in Java, but I'm not the senior in Go, I'm not the senior in Kotlin. So even if I'm going to the Kotlin world, I have to learn again, and then the tool stack and all this stuff. So I have to learn again, and this is a challenge we sometimes don't want to see. But what I see, definitely, if I'm talking about web apps, if I'm working from the application, adding the Linux layer as runtime environment, wrapping it in Docker, wrapping it in Kubernetes snapshots, whatever, and then pushing it out to production. So as a developer, I'm creating the source code. If I'm able to minimize the amount of known vulnerabilities, then this is not existing in all other layers. So what you're more or less talking about is this shifting left. I'm excluding the concept phase. We have there some how to make this wizards and all this stuff per definition secure. This is one thing. But we're talking about the shift left thing. So as early as possible, and we as a developer, if I'm writing this web application, I'm in the first line, and it would be nice if I have this one immediately. So we have two different types of things that could be bad for us. One is compliance, just the wrong license at the right place. The other is the vulnerability. And why I'm mentioning it here is I have now different technologies, and single vulnerabilities are maybe not bad, but I can combine them to different attack vectors over different technologies, not only layers, but over technologies. And now I have this NPM and Java stack. So how to get a view here? The main thing is that if there's a vulnerability somewhere, I have no idea how fast it will be found. I have no influence until this is public. And if this is public, it needs some time until this information is consumable for me. So this is time I can't speed up, or I can just spend some money. But after the time is consumable for me, the timer is running, because this is time frame from I can now use this information up to this is change in production. This is a time I really should focus on, because this I have 100% in my hands. And the main thing is that I need a good test coverage. If I need a good test coverage and I have the web components mapped, for example, to the Java side, then I can use my tool stack with JUnit 5 to do exactly this, testing, because I have to change some versions. And then I want to make sure that the behavior is the same. So a good test coverage is not only good for quality, it's perfect against vulnerabilities as well, because efficient dependency management is one of the low-hanging fruits here. So the main thing is that we have to do it now over different technologies. And if I want to do this as a developer, it would be perfect if I can do it right now. If I'm adding a dependency, so I'm adding a JavaScript library, I'm adding a web component, I'm adding a dependency, Jakarta comes, whatever, that I will get this information as soon as possible. And not only the CI environment is complaining after a day of coding. So speeding this up, if you have time, I can show it in the IDE as well. But the main idea is, if I'm adding some dependencies, and if I'm adding, why I'm mentioning it, because with this connecting to web components, I have a lot of stuff that is in the field of serialization. And serialization itself is a critical thing in Java. So if you're talking about the Jackson family or whatever, we have some vulnerabilities more or less constantly in this dependency. So I should have an eye on it, and then I should change versions so that I'm minimizing the amount of vulnerabilities, because I have to deal with this anyway. We have this free tier. With a free tier, you have the possibility to get this X-ray, this scanner that is working against Artifactory. And this information is available inside your IDE as well. So with the IDE plugin, you can say, I'm adding Harden, for example. Please give me the list of known vulnerabilities over all transitive dependencies. And this is a huge thing, because if you are just talking about adding one dependency, and if you're checking the Harden dependency tree, this is a huge thing. I'm not complaining that this is bad, but it's just a big framework And with a good architecture, you have a lot of fine-grained dependencies. And this is more or less something you're not managing by yourself as a human. So we have some time. I don't know if it is exactly until 1 o'clock or if the Q&A included until 1 o'clock. If we have some time, I can show it in the IDE how it works for you. How to harden the Harden stack.
Please do.
Okay.
We have a few more minutes, but I don't know if we have any other questions. No, we should take a see if somebody has a question. Otherwise, I think you could show a short demo. Go for it.
Yeah. So I have on GitHub this example I'm using as a free tier testing environment. So with this free tier, you can just register. I will share the link. I have it somewhere. And with this, what you could do is you can have Artifactory and X-Ray. And if you're talking about different technologies, it's good if you're grabbing this one. And if we're talking about Docker images with Artifactory, you have this unlimited frequency. You can just grab Docker images. So you're not running into these limitations, just as a side note. So this is a repository I'm using here. And what I've done here is just, I've just a Java project, and I've just added a few dependencies and just a stupid service. So no fancy demo, nothing. It's just to train how to deal with these dependencies and with this, how to harden this stuff. So, okay. Here, this is Sven YouTube, bit.ly Sven YouTube. That's a direct link to the free tier if you want to have this. So what you will get a Maven project, and here I'm connecting to my free tier instance. So it's exactly a free tier instance. You will get the same, and then you're just adding your name here. So then what's your chosen server name during the registration process? So what we're doing is we're adding at some point. So where it is. Plugin management here. So at some point, we're adding dependencies. I don't want to go to all this because it's more or less a workshop. I don't know what's the next workshop. I think in 2 weeks, 1 week. I don't know. We can share the date, but then you can have it as a workshop if you are interested. So we are adding this dependency. And immediately, if I'm adding this dependency, and this is the only dependency plus the JUnit, if I'm checking now what is a transitive dependency tree here, it's huge. You can zoom in, you can do it by yourself, but it's huge. And this is just by adding one single dependency, okay? And even here, you will see that you have overlapping versions and all this stuff. It's just a huge thing. So can you see it better? So, okay. So I just want to show the amount of dependencies we have. And if you're going back, you see this big network. So this you are just not checking by yourself manually, definitely. So I'm adding now this dependency here. And if you have this JFrog plugin to give this one, it's just here. It's just plugins, and then you're searching for JFrog and JFrog. Then you have this plugin, it's for free, you can install it. And then you're adding here your credentials from a test environment, and that's it. So now we have the possibility to push the definitions from the POM XML to the X-Ray instance, adding this dependency here. Where's my mouse? Yeah, there's my mouse. Okay. So adding this dependency means I'm adding a lot of transitive dependencies. If you're reading the dependency tree, then you will get here something like this one. You have here.
So Sven, I would like to do an experiment. So could you, instead of using your current solution, is it easy for you to try to share your screen instead? I want to see if it's your setup that makes the resolution bad, or if it's just your internet connection.
Okay, let's see. I'm switching here the monitor. Let's see, and then I will start screen.
If it's not too hard for you to try that.
No. So I think I need to get the and go. Okay, do I have it? The classic way of sharing screen. Okay, I hope it's better.
I will take some screenshots and share them with you so you can see the difference.
Yeah, sure. That would be perfect. That would be perfect. Okay, so what I have here is I have this dependency, and what I will get is here this plugin, and this plugin will give me the whole tree and the corresponding tree. So what I see here is that the Bardeen, I just took an older version, but you can just change it to a new one or whatever. And be aware of, I don't want to blame the Bardeen framework. I just want to show there are vulnerabilities and they're working on it. Just mention it. So I have here this Bardeen core. Inside this Bardeen core, I have maybe the server dependency. Inside the server dependency, I see, oh, here I have some things. And for sure, the most frameworks, if they're dealing with Jackson or whatever, they have some kind of vulnerabilities if you're dealing with serialization. So if I want to get rid of this one, I can go now to, I don't know, Google Guava or whatever I want to have here. So data binding, I don't know, Cops codec. Cops codec sounds good, huh? So if I want to exclude this one, and what I see here, if I'm clicking here on this dependency, I see that there is a fixed version already available. So I have to change now the dependency models. What I need is right click and say, well, yeah, exclude dependency. It's now going to the uppermost level that will give me this transitive dependency. We'll do a exclusion. And what I'm doing here is just grabbing this one, adding it explicit, giving it back. And what was the version? I don't know. It was 113, no? So and then adding version 113. So we're reading the information, grabbing this stuff, analyzing, and so on. What could happen here at this stage? It could happen that there is a vulnerability A, and there is a fix in the version whatever. You're adding this version, and then in this version, there are new but different vulnerabilities. So it could be that you're hopping 1 or 2 times until it's really done. It is not always the latest version that is the best one. Sometimes it makes sense to go 1 or 2, 3 versions back, because then there is not this vulnerability not existing. And then you need a good test coverage to make sure that even if you're switching up or down with a version, the functionality you're using from this dependency is just the same. So test-driven development is just your best friend if you're going to the field of security. So what we have here now, we are just, I think that's it done. I have now explicitly this commons codec. I'm now going here to this Bardeen core, and I see this common codec stuff is not available anymore. And now I'm going just step by step through this one. I can just go here and say, okay, I want to have the full tree changed, or I'm going to the latest one and changing this one. If you want to have a long example, really step by step until it's done, on YouTube, I have this video in my DevSecOps playlist about how to harden the Bardeen framework. And there I show all the steps until it's done. But I think the basic idea is more or less shown, analyzing the dependencies and doing it. And yeah, and all package managers that are managed by Artifactory can be scanned by X-ray. And this means if you have different technologies in your project, then you can go over the scan of different technologies inside your IDE or inside the web UI, whatever. So you can have it for free in the free tier, just try it. And yeah, any questions so far? Because now my chat window is far away. Here, okay.
Are you on your way of wrapping up?
More or less. If there are no questions,
we're trying to keep the time a little bit, so I think we should go over to questions if we have one, and then I will stop the recording. Thank you very much, Sven.